Just think of it as the rough draft of the podcast world. This is the Newbie Writers Podcast with your hosts Damien Boat and Catharine Bramkamp.
Good morning. It's episode 135 of the Newbie Writers Podcast, and Catharine's safely in Russia, which is a weird sort of thing to say, I suppose. I received a picture from her that had "keep off the grass" in Russian, so I don't know what that's about. But anyway, so it's just me. So feel free to turn off now. No, don't do that. So I have a very special guest with me. No, don't do that, because I have Karma Bennett with me. Good morning, Karma.
Hello!
And can I say, I've got to get this out the way. That's weird to say good morning, Karma. It's like people say to me all the time, Karma's going to get you.
Yeah, I get it a lot as well.
What was wrong with your parents?
Hippies, naturally.
Yeah, well, so were mine, but they called me Damien. I don't know, have you struggled with that, being called Karma? Have you ever thought about, I'll change my name to Jane?
Tough in grade school, but now I like it.
Yeah.
I think probably, anyone dealing with someone in customer support and they're trying to decide, should I give her money back or give her a hard time? Probably going to lean towards the nice option, right?
Well, yeah, this is true. How can you mess with Karma when you're on the phone?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I should have been a cocktail waitress, right? That would have done me well.
Yeah,
Everyone
but then
would
people would assume you just chose that name then.
That's actually the worst part about it, because if you think about it, having been named Karma, I've never had a nickname. So that's sort of the best way to get on my bad side is when I first meet someone, they say, what's your real name? Because it's not a nickname, and I've never had a nickname. Because you Ram, Car, nah. There's really just no good way to go with that that's going to rule as much as Karma.
Unless you were called Llama Karma, which would be bad.
Yeah, I don't think that's as good.
No.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that's not as good as a name.
Oh, hey, make it your own, I say. At least it's interesting and you stand out. You could utilize that. That's what we're going to talk about today a bit as well, with publicity, social media, blogging. You're kind of lucky because you've got a name that stands out. Do you find that helps a bit when it comes to getting your name out there and your business out there?
I don't really know, because I've never had a different name, but I will say that it was easy to get a URL with my name in it, although I don't really think that's all that advantageous. And in fact, I usually try to discourage people from choosing a URL that's just their name.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing that, though, for the email, which, again, I find a bit strange. But yeah, I've worked with people, John Smith, for example, and they'll have John at johnsmith.com.
True,
right,
yeah.
That's a bit weird.
But say he could have John Smith at amazingfantasywriter.com, and then that URL would give searchers some indication what the site is about. Because when you're doing search engine optimization, one of the biggest things that Google or the other search engines take into consideration is the URL, because that's basically what the entire site is about, right?
Yeah.
So if you happen to have amazingfantasywriting.com and then someone searches for amazing fantasy writing, there's a super high chance that Google's going to rank that high. Yeah. Because they're thinking, obviously, this whole site is about amazing fantasy writing. Whereas with your name, unless your name is John Smith, sadly, if somebody searches for you, they're going to find you. But even if they don't, even if you do have a really common name, if they search for your name in the book, in other words, if someone already knows you, it's really not that hard to find you, usually on the internet. Whereas you want people to try to find your website that don't already know you.
Well, is search engine optimization, or SEO, we all get the spam emails, is that a bit of a myth?
It's not a myth, but it is definitely, it's not that it's overhyped, but a lot of the things that need to be done to improve your search ranking are just basically the things you would do to be a good blogger in the first place. And so a lot of these SEOs now are saying, SEO is dead because everything that we used to say that was a trick or a cheat, Google has figured out. So it's things like using headings properly really helps your SEO. Instead of just making the heading bold, actually marking it as a heading. So what we call semantic markup, or things like labeling your images properly. That's just a little tiny thing that's going to help your search engine ranking, but it's also helping people find, label your images properly so that, if somebody searches for an image, it doesn't come up STC7526. It comes up girl holding a balloon, so that if someone's looking for a picture of a girl holding a balloon, they might find your website, and then, they never knew that this was also about the kind of thing that interests them. So it's not that SEO isn't real, it's that if you're doing a great job as a blogger and you're doing everything right, then there's a good chance you're doing the things that need to be done for SEO at this point.
Yeah, I mean, with the Newbie Writer site, that ranks quite well, I think, because we have content that's updated all the time. The images thing, I've got to work on when it comes to the titles a bit better. I mean, WordPress is a bit funky like that. If you don't give it a title, it'll give you one as you upload it.
Yeah, and then you have to edit the permalink later.
I know, and sometimes when, like Catharine, she might schedule her posts, especially when she's away now for the next 3 weeks. So she can't have her then trying to log in from somewhere else to change them or think about doing that. Everything's sort of interconnected. So we've got the podcast and various other bits, but that's cool. But why I asked about the SEO stuff is I'm baffled by, I have a business, right, with a domain, and it's a WordPress site, but it's pretty much static. So it has information pages, and that's it. No actual updated content in that sense. And I look at the stats and it says no one's visited your site. We don't rank on Google, which is a pain in the ass. Well, we do somewhere, because I then get calls from clients or just random people saying, hey, I found your website on the internet. Well, I Googled and your site came up. And I'm going, that's really strange, because I can't find myself. So I start, I mean, how much do you...
Do you have analytics installed?
I do, but it always says no one's visited. That's what's weird. So
you should be able to, I know what you're saying, you should be able to click on specifically and see what people are searching for that makes them find you. And Google doesn't report if it's a certain, like they only report at a certain number of searches. Like if it's below a certain number of searches a month, they don't bother to report it. That's where people start to talk about the long tail. It's like you can still get a lot of people coming to your site for more obscure things that aren't getting searched for that often. And Newbie Writers actually is a good example of something. I mean, I haven't done the research on that particular phrase, but I would think that there's probably a few people out there searching for the phrase Newbie Writers that don't know about your podcast, but at the same time, it's not like, new writing tips, like something a little bit more generic and obvious. So you're probably getting some searches, every now and then, just via people who are curious for that phrase.
Yeah, and we tend to get, I think, like backlinks help. See, this was the other thing, because we're like a community website, podcast, that sort of thing. I'm not in competition with anyone. And so then other websites can link us and say, hey, check these guys out, and give and take. And that really helps. So we get visitors.
It's so important.
But then from like a business point of view, I can't put my competitors' links and say, yeah, check these guys out. And they're not going to do the same to me. So you don't get any backlinks, really, when it comes to that. So it's quite a difficult sort of scenario. And I even Googled, I have certain terms like in my write-up, and if I Google those, it still doesn't come up. And I find myself
that's a problem.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God. But, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I've tested that before on various websites where, if I want to find something, I'll intentionally try just using Google rather than searching within my site to see if I can find it easily. That's a problem. You might have something that's hurting your SEO. Like, for example, duplicate pages could be an issue, or and that's actually an issue where sometimes people do hire a professional SEO. I mean, SEO is just it's something I do. It's not, my whole deal. But, somebody who's a professional in that regard, sometimes it's like, well, my site's been buried for reasons I don't understand. And then it's almost like, when you have, I can write HTML code, but if I have a bug or something that's broken, then I would want to hire a professional to kind of figure it out and parse out where it's going wrong.
Yes. Don't get me started on that either. I love that. WordPress is a funky little thing too.
I love it. I'm a huge fan. I should get a T-shirt.
What?
For WordPress.
I love WordPress. WordPress lives here. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, at the moment with Newbie Writers, I'm struggling a little bit. I don't know why. It might be just an update. And I've been meaning to mention this actually for our listeners. If you go to the podcasts directory, like the Newbie Writers thing on the drop-down, the way I have it set up is you can select an episode, a previous episode from a drop-down list. And that works for episodes 1 to 25, 25 to 50. But for some reason, from the 50 to current, it won't do the drop-down. Even though the code is all the same, I can copy and paste the code from one thing to another. For some reason, WordPress changes it and adds all this extra code. It's really weird. So at the moment, I am working on it. Don't go to that page. I might delete it.
Yeah. The thing that always bugged me is that they tend to add paragraph breaks automatically. Because I would do these posts that were, they call them listicles, like long lists, like, the best indie pop of 2012 or whatever. And so I wanted to format it properly so it would be formatted as a list, but each list has a full paragraph describing each song with a link to the song. And because it was automatically adding breaks to it, it was just really messing up the HTML. And I guess I was just doing something a little bit more complex formatting-wise than we're prepared for. So that was annoying. But, that's the amazing thing about WordPress. There's a plugin for everything. So you can almost just about, I know there is a plugin that lets you get rid of that feature. And I just decided to, do my lists in it. And basically not using HTML to do the list, but just writing the number 1, which goes against my gut instinct to do, perfect semantic code, but that's okay.
Yes. Well, I should just get a lists add-on and just be done with it. But anyway.
Just make everything a list, because people only click on lists. That's what I hear.
I know, but when you've got 135 episodes, I started to think, well, hang on, that's a very long list.
Oh, no, I'm talking like a single post, like top 10, you know? Yeah.
No.
People love those.
I know. What is it with lists?
I thought about this, and I have a theory. I have a theory. So my theory is that people like lists because it implies that you've read every single thing in the world and narrowed it down to the 5 or 10 best.
Right, yes.
Which is never, ever true. But somehow that's, I think, what our instincts like, oh, these aren't just, 10 movies. These are the 10 movies I should watch on this subject.
Yeah, and I am the king dick of everything, and I say that these are the 10.
Yeah, and so even sometimes I'm tempted to click on a list even if I'm sure I'm going to disagree, because then I get to go to the comments and complain, and then I get to feel self-righteous, so that's always fun.
I complain a lot on things like that. And do you expect...
that's what comments are for.
Well, yeah, but when you complain, do you expect a little bit of a response? I complained to a TV station yesterday. I said, on Twitter, I said, thanks for ruining my evening for putting Shrek on too late. Now my boy is having a tantrum. So, yes.
I guess I expect a response, and I'm always looking forward to it when I write the comment, and then later on I dread reading it. Yeah. It's like, oh, somebody responded. Now you have to respond back. Why did I create this obligation? Why didn't I just keep my mouth shut?
I love responding back. Like Amber, who sent me a thing saying that lists are awesome. Well, right. Anyway. Writing. Why? Why did you get into futurist fiction communications? What was it about writing that you thought I could be a publicist, social media guru in this industry?
Well, I love books and I love writing, and that's my life. And I'm extremely extroverted and extremely outgoing. No problem talking to strangers generally. So I didn't know that when I was a kid and I wanted to work with books, I didn't know that a publicist was a thing. And even to this day, when I go to cocktail parties, a lot of times people don't understand what it is that I do for a living. So, it wasn't something that I said, oh, this is what I want to be, but I knew that I wanted to work in the book industry and I wanted to be surrounded by writers. And I came out to the West Coast with that explicit intention, and I got an internship with Ready Made Magazine, which was a super cool magazine that doesn't exist anymore, sadly. Oh. And then I worked for Ulysses Press for a spell for 4 years. And and what I love about being freelance is that I really have the freedom to champion the books that I am most excited about. Instead of being handed a book and being told, this is the book you're going to be excited about this season. And I also really like consulting with people. I like, when you work in-house, your job is this thing, and then the authors always come at you with questions that aren't really your job. Like, they'll ask you things like, how do I prepare for this interview on, Good Morning Seattle? And it's a little bit of your job, but it's not really, It's like your job is to get them that next interview. Whereas I really like with consulting that the author can come at me and with a million different questions, and it's at my discretion and their discretion. They want the information. I'm happy to share it with them. And so I kind of like that hand-holding aspect of it too.
Well, how do you deal with, though, you said you can sort of pick and choose about what you become excited about. What happens to someone like me if I was to contact you and say, look, I really need a hand with publicity, this and this is my book, and you read it and you go, oh, I can't work with this. This is awful. How do you deal with that sort of thing? Or do you take it on anyway and go, well, this is my business, I do need the clients, that sort of thing?
No, definitely not. Especially because if I go back to the same editors over and over again with a bunch of crummy books, they're going to stop reading my emails. So, I'm putting my name on it. So I have to like it at least a little bit, And I think actually it's funny because the name of the company's Features Fiction Communications, but I actually handle more nonfiction. And I think one of the reasons is because with nonfiction, it's really straightforward whether it works or not, and I can get a pretty good idea when someone sends me the book. Like I recently took on a client who's writing a book on how to protect your house against wildfires. Like, yeah, I get this. This is well written. Whereas, somebody else sent me a YA fantasy book about fairies, and I got 2/3 of the way through it, and I thought, is this heroine ever going to do anything for herself? Is she going to get rescued every single time? And maybe that was going to be the climax of the book, her waking up and realizing that she needed to take charge of her own fate. But I just didn't have the will to get to that point, So because I'm super critical, I tend to say, okay, well, this is informative and well thought out for a nonfiction book, then I'm more likely to take that on. Whereas fiction, I tend to be very choosy.
But how do you let that author down? Because they're very fickle. They think that what they've got is going to be the next big thing, and then to have someone sit down and go, yeah, you'd be better off doing something else.
No, I would never do that. Well, I turn a lot of people down, and it's not even because I don't like their work. It's because my client list is full. So that was actually a bummer. When I met Catharine, that I had done a whole bunch of speaking at the San Francisco Writers Conference, and I was meeting all these people and all these potential clients, and my client list was totally full, like from a month before I went to the conference. So, the timing wasn't that helpful, but that's how these things go. So I frequently turn people down. It's not because their writing's not good, and usually what I like to do is refer them to another publicist, just so they have somewhere else they can go, and then that person can turn it down. Or not.
I tend to, with my business, I occasionally have people ring up that they don't really read your website or your card or your flyer, and so I specialize in the commercial and education sectors, and they'll ring up and go, yeah, mate, the football's on the weekend. Can you put my TV in my living room?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, right. So rather,
it's nice to see other people get that in other, lines of work too.
They just try it on, and rather than me try to explain to them that this is not what we do, I usually find a company that I've worked for previously that I cannot stand, and I will say, I'm sorry, but we're actually really booked up for the next month or two. Try giving so-and-so a call. Here's their number. Not, oh, thanks, mate. And then I just have this thing of them ringing up this company that I'm dirty with and them having to go through that. It's just like my little bit of revenge.
That's pretty exciting, yeah.
Yeah, and then that person's none the wiser. There you go. There's a little tip to my dodgy business tactics.
Yeah.
Anyway, so who gets a publicist? I like this on your website. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, thank you.
People
do find my website via search, so I must be doing something right in that regard.
Well, that's right. I think you've got it right. Everyone that is looking for a publicist would type in, why do I need a publicist?
Exactly, yeah.
And that is the question, why? I mean, we hear constantly from authors who are published, saying that the publisher's making them do their marketing, their this, or this is coming out soon, so they're having to do blog tours. So then you've got the self-publishers just mimicking that and doing the same. Why then do we need someone like yourself to do it for us?
Yeah, I wish that I weren't so needed, in fact, because we're reaching this really strange place where, I know you've heard, running this podcast, you've heard the rumor that self-publishing is blowing up and it's a revolution, and it is a revolution, and it's not a word I would use lightly. Books are going through a revolution that they haven't seen since the invention of the printing press, and what's opened up is this possibilities for distribution and reaching people, but what hasn't changed is traditional publicity, and that I know I'm moving a little bit from a tangent from what you said, but just bear with me here. Is that, people will put out these books now, and they'll self-publish them, and they'll just be like, bing, I press the button, and now it's live, and they think if you build it, they will come, but you really have to be building that platform. But then what's happening because of this revolution is the publishers are getting stingy, and they're, tightening their little fists and not wanting to invest in the publicity aspect. I mean, I'm not saying all publishers do this, of course, but a lot of them, I see this, people come to me just like you're saying, and they're saying, my publisher isn't going to pay for publicity, and that just seems so wrong to me. I mean, when Nike comes out with a new pair of tennis shoes, they don't, just stick those shoes on the back shelf somewhere and not run advertisements or do any kind of outreach to let people know that they have a new pair of tennis shoes, because they've invested thousands and thousands of dollars in this pair of shoes, and every book in a publisher's catalog is that way to some extent. They're putting in the very least $2,000 to $3,000. I mean, very, very least, probably closer to $10,000, even for a small press, is going to be investing that in every single book. Then to put that kind of investment behind something and not back it is just completely ludicrous to me. But I see it all the time, because people, once, twice a week come to me with that very situation, and they say, my publisher is not investing in publicity. So the first thing I do is I ask them, well, do you know that for sure? Because you should push back against that a little bit and say things like, if your publisher is not interested in investing in publicity, you should at the very least try to press them to do outreach to the trade publications like Book Reporter and Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and Forward, because those have to be sent in galleys before the book actually goes to press. It's a very small thing, and it's very easy for the publicist to do that little tiny bit of work. I mean, seriously, send 8 galleys to a list that they already have.
Do you think, though, that they just become a bit complacent, thinking, well, it's quite easy for people to self-publish. They can just do the Smashwords thing. They can just Kindle, it's up, and they effectively become that. But they get. So when you say
they, when you say be complacent, do you mean the publisher or the author?
So they can just, the author submits to a publisher, the publisher goes, yeah, cool, we'll publish it. All right, click, it's out there, ebook. Yeah, we'll sort that out to be printed, done. And then that person is expected to do still all that marketing to sell the book, rather than the publisher going, yeah, we'll take you on, we like this book, we'll help you, we'll publish it, we'll market it, that sort of thing.
I don't know what's going on behind the scenes at these crummy publishers that don't do publicity for people, because I've not worked for one. But and the other publishing professionals I know work for reputable companies. But I think to some extent you have situations. I will say I've seen situations where it's not as nefarious as that, where it's more like the publisher recognizes that this is a good book, and they don't necessarily have the time and money to invest in a proper publicity campaign, but they're thinking, well, I can help this person by getting the book properly copy edited and getting a good cover for it, and getting a typeset for it. And so I think they really are doing that behind the scenes work, but the publicity is really the part that just can't be replaced. Not yet. I'm not speaking for the future, but we're not yet to that place where a person can do their own publicity. I mean, where most people can. I mean, even if you have someone who's just really good at doing outreach and really good at promoting themselves, A, it looks better if it's coming from someone else. It always looks better to say, this guy's book is great, than check out my awesome book. Yes. And B, there are a lot of people who just don't want to see books from authors. I was at a panel for the book promotion forum, and there were, 3 or 4 bloggers who blog about, I think it was YA fantasy. So this is very niche, and they weren't even what you call traditional media people. They were just not just bloggers, like anything against that, but they weren't from the New York Times, is my point. And 3 of these 4 guests said that they won't review manuscripts from authors. And that's not even self-published authors, just authors, period. And it got a little sticky in the room because there were authors in the room who were like, well, what did I pay for this? Why did I pay to come to this luncheon? Yeah. And it was a really interesting point. And one of the bloggers, though, said that I won't review things that came from my best friend, because if I don't like the book, then that creates a really awkward, sticky situation. And that he'd seen a 14-year-old blogger getting death threats from an author. People will say, nobody can put the passion behind the book that I can. Like I've heard people say, I don't want a publicist because nobody can represent this book with the passion that I can. Well, that's kind of the problem. At the end of the day, if I go to an editor and she doesn't like the book, I can't hound her. I can't make her life difficult because I have to go back to her next month with a different book. Yeah,
that's right. And that's where my problem lies a little bit. Catherine's, she's written her second book in a series, and it's up for beta reading. But with the first one, she sent it out to me, and she sent it to me. And we do this show once a week. We talk during the week as well. And I don't know, that doesn't come into my brain. I just messaged her back. That first draft I saw, I said, this is shit. She's gone, well, okay, how? And we went through it. And that's all part of it. And so this time, she sent it to me and she said, okay, I've already had some good feedback from my friends, but can you give me the real feedback, please?
The real feedback.
I think that's important as well. But I kind of agree with that person that was saying that I don't read manuscripts or anything from the author themselves, because there is that biased approach. What I write, I think, is going to be amazing. So it's going to be sort of clouded a bit. Does that give a bit of an indication then that a book is good if there's a lot of third-party people saying you've really got to check this out?
Yeah, and that's why I think that this revolution won't be complete until we have something like that. So we've got this open distribution model now through Amazon and IndieBound where you can, if somebody self-publishes a book, you can make it available for sale. But in terms of vouching for that book, there's always going to be a distinction between a self-published author and a traditionally published author, so long as there's no gatekeeper or no one vouching for a self-published book. And that doesn't mean that your self-published book cannot be awesome and amazing, but it does mean that it's on the same level and it's competing on, in the same group with somebody who just, wrote something and didn't even spell check it and, forgot to finish chapter 4 and just threw it up because they just didn't, it was like, I'm tired of working on this and I just want to get it out there. And you hear that and you see that. And when you talk to publishing industry people, and the difference, it's so stark because when you work in publishing, you get sent things, you have a slush pile, and you get sent these terrible, terrible manuscripts from people who just really didn't make an effort. And, it's when you're only talking to other people who care about writing and are putting in 100% and you're only seeing those finished products, then it's easy to assume that, everybody out there who is doing self-publishing is making these great things. And the thing is that if you're an editor, you have no way of knowing when something lands on your desk if it's any good or if it's even worth looking at all. But I mean, when I say even worth looking at, again, I'm talking about something riddled with spelling errors. Whereas comparatively, at least if somebody published it, then again, we know that they've not only vouched for it like, oh, I like this, but they've put thousands of dollars behind that. They're committed to saying, I like this so much that I would spend thousands of dollars and go to a sales conference and, try to get to Barnes & Noble to carry it in their bookstore and, stand behind it and really put my money behind it and invest in it. And because of that, there's got to be this distinction between publishers and self-publishers. And so I think what's going to happen, this is just my crazy theory, that for this revolution to really come full circle, what we need is some kind of crowdsourced and heavily popular, because I know it's been tried before, but just needs to be popular, as popular as Amazon, some sort of crowdsourced way to review books, such that, you put it out there and it can really rise up. And even Amazon can't count for that because it's really hard to get, you can get up in the sub pages of Amazon, but they sell things like, this little spammy email lists when Amazon spams people. Check out these 10 new books. To get on those lists, or a lot of times to get on the buy this book with this book, those cost thousands of dollars. And that kind of stuff, goes into how they rank their books. So
yeah. And the Amazon,
totally open.
but with doing something like that where there's an honest review system, surely that could be corrupted. I mean, the Amazon system is seriously corrupted. And,
yeah, agreed.
You know, I can sort of pick it a bit, especially if you're around the writing communities. You know, you're part of Google Plus groups or Facebook things. You can see an author, and then the people that leave the 5-star comments, the 4-star comments, seem to be part of those groups, or their friends, or names you recognize, and you think this is just a joke. So how would you overcome that if you had a, you know, crowd-funded review system?
Yeah, well, I don't pretend to have the answer, but I don't. What I'm saying is, I don't think that self-publishing can become equal to traditional publishing until there's some giant source that, you know, vouches for it. I mean, they managed to make Wikipedia usually relatively accurate. With their, you know, I'm saying it's possible to build such a system, and, you know, with a complicated back end that people in the front end don't see. But then the other trick is that it also has to become popular. And I've seen some pretty neat sites where it's just, you can throw a manuscript up and people can judge on it, and then the popular one gets published. And I think on my resources for writers, I have a page on my site. I have a link to 1 or 2 publishing houses that have that model, which I think is super, super cool. But that can't compete. I mean, it's got to be, you know, at least nationwide, if not worldwide, in popularity to really compete, because otherwise there's nothing separating a good self-published author from someone who just really didn't put in any effort at all. But, you know, I don't have the answer as to how to code that, because, you know, it's not my area.
It's an interesting concept, though. Like, if you try and take the Wikipedia approach, if you were to do that, apply that to some sort of writing thing, it'd have to be free. This is where it gets sort of weird. So you'd have these people reviewing these books, and if someone was lucky enough to get, I don't know, there might be a cap, like 5,000 reviews or something through the free process. Once it's published, then those people can go, well, I want that book for free still. It's very awkward.
Oh, you mean it would have to be free to review the book?
Yeah, I'd say so.
You mean the review copy? Well, I don't know about that. And they could do something where, you know, when the book first is, like, brand new, or you could call it an advanced reader copy, that you can then get the book for free, and then officially, once the book is officially out, then it starts to cost money. So there's ways you could do it. And I don't think it has to be perfect either, because, you know, the New York Times Book Review isn't perfect. That system for ranking books. And, you know, and Amazon isn't perfect. And, you know, when you go to Barnes & Noble and you look at the table, or even the books that face out, the publishers pay thousands of dollars to get their book just to face out for a couple weeks. And I think about that every time I'm, you know, waiting for a movie and I have half an hour to kill, so I'm wandering through the bookstore, and I think about, I really do look at those books that face out. You're just way more likely to pick them up. So it's really worth the money. But even that, which you would think would just be, you know, the staff at the bookstore democratically deciding, you know, oh, well, these are the ones we're going to face out, or, you know, the person in this section gets to decide. Like, I mean, to some extent, there's a person who makes that decision, but then there's a payment process that happens as well. So the system we're in isn't pure now anyway, but we don't have a system to replace that system in terms of, you know, spreading the word on which books are good that can compete so far with the traditional system.
Well, yeah, and it's still a bit biased. I mean, you know, Amber in the chat was saying that, you know, traditional publishing houses, they don't really do any more than 6 weeks promotional backing for their authors unless you're a big name, you know, like the Stephen King, Stephen Donaldson, those sorts of things. So you're sort of on the back burner straight away if you're a complete unknown.
Yeah, and that's actually the probably the easiest and simplest advice I would give to anybody who's looking to promote the book that they've just finished writing is don't wait until your book is out to get a publicist. Wait, I mean, don't get finish the book first, but don't, because people come to me and they're like, my book is 4 months old. That's a huge mark against you, because it's not the publicist's fault that just having a new book is news. And if you have a new book and no one's heard of it because it's brand new, and you go to an editor and you say, this book's going to be awesome, and you can talk it with hype. I mean, I would discourage anyone from writing a press release or making contact that has a lot of hype in it, on exclamation points. But they don't know whether this book is going to be the next big thing. They don't know whether it's going to have hype around it. They don't know whether it's going to be on, network TV. But if the book is 6 months old, you can probably guess that's not going to happen. And they want to think that there's a chance that if they take this book, that they're getting onto something that's going to, that they're getting in early on something that's going to be huge. So that's not the fault of the publicist, really, or the publisher. That's the fault of the media, that the media likes things that are new and hot and fresh and might, blow up and become the next big thing.
All right, let's role play. I'll be Damien. You can be Karma. Now, if I was to come to you, contact you, and say, right, my book is done. It's at the editors, and it's going to be released soon, or whatever. What would be the next step? What would you say to me? So, all right, well, we need to get such and such in place.
Are we assuming that you're my actual client, or would
Yes.
this include the part where I decide whether you're worthy of my
Let's just say that I am worthy.
Okay.
of being in your presence. What's the process then? And what sort of costs are involved? You don't have to give exact things, but just ballpark figures. Because I know there's going to be a lot of newbie writers out there going, well, I can't afford a publicist.
Yeah. I would recommend setting aside $5,000, $6,000 just based on comparing, looking at what other publicists charge.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of it is, we haven't really talked about this, but what I do traditional publicity, but I'm also super interested in helping people build their own platforms, and that's, helping them with their blog and helping them with social media and that aspect of it. So sometimes somebody will come to me and I'll go to their website and I'll look at their Twitter feed and I'll say, this is beautiful. You don't need an ounce of my help in that regard. So they just need traditional publicity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you have your blog campaign. That's sort of one sort of a path of work to go down, and then you have your traditional campaign, and then within traditional campaigns, it just depends on how many diverse audiences that book can reach. Because let's take a book that for example, I a long time ago I had a book that was Cats with Guns, and it was kind of a joke. Yeah, it was really cute.
Yeah,
it was a joke on how they have like magazines or books where it'll be a sexy woman, like a catalog spread holding a weapon. It'll be real data about the weapon she's holding, and she's like, Julie loves her AK-47, and instead these were cats. So I thought, let's, we can send this to the gun people and send this to the cat people, and those are two totally different campaigns. Because granted, it's you should customize whatever contact you're sending, whatever you're sending out. But even still, even if you're, but if you're contacting Cat Fancy and then you're contacting Catmopolitan, which I don't think that magazine exists anymore, but what a great title.
Hang on. Catmopolitan?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, Catmopolitan. It used to be a thing.
Right. Is your cat moody? Try this.
Yeah, exactly. That's a bit. Yeah.
Right.
So it's gonna be a similar pitch. You might you customize it a little bit to make it more Catmopolitan-y than Cat Fancy-y. But versus the gun magazines, that's a totally different market. So it would depend on how many sort of different campaigns you're looking at. And then it also depends on how timely the book is. Like I was just saying, I this recent client I took on who has a book on wildfires, that's just going to keep being an issue, all summer long. That's going to keep coming up in the news. And so, so it all depends. But usually the first step is to make a media kit, which would be at the bare minimum a press release and a letter, sort of a bit like, if someone's applying for a job, they would send a letter. It's similar in concept. And then sometimes it's nice to include things like interview questions or an excerpt, or if the author, I usually put the bio on the press release, but if the author just has a spectacular bio that really needs its own page, then you can do something like that. A lot of people tend to create, a lot of publicists will create a huge press kit and put a lot of time into just putting lots of documents in there, but it's my opinion that in most cases, if somebody wants to read the book, I don't think like having 10 extra pages in the press kit is going to really make that big a difference.
No. And we tend to ask for them, or we get sent them for some authors we have on. And to be honest, because we're more of we're on the media side of things, I don't like a 10-page press kit because, we're here to interview someone and find out about them. I don't need to read it all. And then I tend to prefer maybe a photo of the person, their cover, bit of a blurb about them, and I'm talking like a paragraph or two, and maybe a bit of a write-up about the book. You can put that on like 2 pages. And that's...
Yeah, and I sometimes think people tend to, when they're trying to pad the press kit and make it bigger, it just gets redundant.
I look at some of them, and I just literally do. Just pull out those pictures, highlight a little bit, and go, done, that's in our show notes. Because from our point of view, when we do show notes, I incorporate that in there. Helps with a bit of the searching. If someone looks up that author, it's going to come up with a little excerpt. Hey, they're on our show. I don't want a visitor to our site to read a massive blog post that has all the ins and outs, because then that person will say, well, what's the point of me listening to that interview then? It's all there. So I'd like to be able to sneak those questions in and actually learn a bit about the person that I'm interviewing. No point in me sort of flicking through a press kit going, so tell me about 1993 when you released that book. Who cares? You know, I don't know. But all of this stuff, this publicity stuff, it sort of is based on having some sort of following. Would you take on, a client that didn't really have much of a web presence at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are my favorite because I get to start from scratch. And so, but I mean, everything takes time. You don't become Michael Jackson overnight. And if I'd be less likely to take on a client like that if they had really high expectations. I had this client who, he wasn't a client. I had this guy approach me who lived in Australia.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I don't blame him for that. But I had gotten somebody else who wrote a book similar to his on Fox and Friends. And so he came to me and he said, well, just get me on Fox and Friends and I know it'll be a bestseller. And I didn't want to take him on because, nobody on Fox and Friends is going to pull some guy out of Australia when they can just grab some guy in the U.S.
Well, yeah.
They're just not. And so I knew his expectations were not in match with what I could do for his book. So in that case, I probably wouldn't take it on, but if they don't have a website at all, I mean, I can build them a website from scratch. I can build them a WordPress in a weekend and have that ready to go. And like I said, I like consulting with people. I like showing them the ropes. That's fun for me. So that's okay.
Do you think blog tours are beneficial? I see this around a bit. I'm on a blog tour and it's just a stock standard post on someone else's blog. Do you think that helps?
I think I don't do a lot of blog tours. I'm not opposed to them. I don't want to speak authoritatively on them when I should be doing them, but I guess I just haven't. I tend to do specifically look for a guest post on a specific topic. Like instead of, we're all going to post on each other's blogs. And I participated in them. And I didn't necessarily read all of the other people who participated in the blog tour, and I didn't really feel like the other people participating were coming to my site and reading about it. So I think what really matters is the community that's hosting the blog tour a strong community? Because if it is, then people probably will actually click through and read those other posts because they're just excited to be a part of that community, period. But so, anything that's going to be creating links from someone else's site to your site is usually a good thing. And it's good for your search engine optimization, even if people aren't actively reading the post, like ideally they would be. But I don't tend to go that route. I tend to specifically go to a blog and say, hey, I have this author who writes on a similar topic. Would you be interested in a guest post? That tends to be the approach I take more often.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Amazon reviews, though. I see a lot of blog tours that are very incestuous. So there's the person A is on a blog tour, so they post on their friends' blogs, and then vice versa, and it sort of just goes around. Do you, with your clients, do you try and push them outside? So if they are set up a bit with followers on Twitter and they've got a bit of a social media presence, do you try and say to them, all right, we're going to try and push you outside of that comfort zone and broaden your horizons a little bit?
Yeah, I don't usually ask for permission. I just do it. I have to know what they would be competent to speak about. so that I don't, so they know that I'm going to be doing that. But it's not really that different asking for a guest post on a popular blog than it is going to the editor or a columnist for a newspaper and trying to get them, an interview or a book review there. It's a pretty similar process. And if anything, it can actually be identical in that, sometimes magazines now will have blog only, it's a print magazine, but they have a, just blog only type of people that don't represent in the print edition, or they'll have people who work for the newspaper that have specifically a blog for that paper. So it can actually be the exact same thing when doing that outreach. So, if they've hired me to find placements for them, they have to expect that I'm going to try to do that. I mean, that's what I'm here for. I've had clients who are physically unwell or were not, in the country. So in those instances, you have to just really cut back and say, okay, we're just looking for book reviews.
Yeah. Have you ever had it backfire, though, where, a lot of authors, and I can attest to this, they don't really like being out in that public eye that much, or public speaking. Have you ever had it where you've set up a radio interview and then your author's vomited on air?
Yeah. Yeah, I did have a couple instances that backfired. I had I had two authors, one of which was extremely telegenic and has his own fan base, and he and the co-author of his book got on Fox and Friends, and actually they ended up getting the Colbert bump because then is it Geraldo or Donahue, the one with the stash that's on Fox? He said, "Oh, I like this kid," and then Colbert ended up making fun of that, so they got Colbert too. But the friend just looked like a deer in the headlights. They're best friends, and they co-wrote this book together. They're teenagers. It's like one was 17 and one was 19. Yeah. And the the younger one, he just looked like sweating on his from his face, just terrified the whole time. But that's okay. Probably still helped the book. And then I had an instance where I was working on a photo book, and this was very strange. Then I set up this samples, like it was, funny photos kind of book. And so I got a blogger, a very popular blog, to post these photos on their site and do a little feature on it. And I was, all happy about it. And I get an email from the author saying that this guy's used my pictures without my permission, so I'm going to sue him. And then he wrote me back an hour later and said, well, I haven't heard from you, so I've contacted this guy, and I'm now telling him I'm going to sue him. It's like an hour later.
Wow.
And that was really upsetting to me. And I'm of the opinion that, I keep an eye on my email as the day goes along, but I try not to constantly check it, because it's one of those things that really hurts your productivity. So I don't feel bad about not responding to his email within the hour, but I know he felt like, well, you should have responded right away. I was like, well, I have to be doing work. I can't just be constantly waiting for you to email me. So that was really awkward. Because, I feel so bad. This editor's taken a chance on me and taken a chance on this author. And, for him to turn around and say, I'm going to sue you, that was just a bummer.
But that wouldn't happen all the time. I mean,
of course not, no. That's really unorthodox.
Yeah. That would be hard to, I guess, bounce back from, though, a little bit. So the next time you get someone that's got a similar sort of idea or book, you'd be going, well, hang on, it would just pop into your head, wouldn't it? You say, well, is this your work? And then how do you then cover that so you don't offend your potential client as well? Mind you, if someone said that to me, like, well, hang on, are these photos, we need to verify they're yours, I wouldn't really be offended. But I guess
no, it wasn't that it was that he thought they were posting his photos from his book without his permission. And so he thought that was a copyright infringement, essentially, and he was just really hung up on that idea, which realistically, if nobody knows who you are, then the publicity is good. Like, yes. Even if they put your whole book there, it's probably still better than not having it there.
I think that stuff about the copyright infringement, it's a bit stupid. Like, yes, okay, I get it. If you take someone else's work and you sell it as your own, I get that bit. But just that whole putting stuff out there, if you forget to reference it, so be it. If you don't make claims that it's your own, then I think it should just stay there. Because even the Metallica thing, you think of that. Now, they've been criticised heavily now because they're often on YouTube and they'll leave a comment on someone who's playing one of their songs in their bedroom, or they've posted up the whole album of something, and they're like, cool, thanks, man. And people are like, hang a minute, only 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you were suing people for putting their stuff up on the internet.
Yeah, I almost wonder if that's their publicist trying to do a little reverse PR to, bring it back around. I mean, I think I'm really big on attribution. If you use a photo, maybe not with like an animated GIF, but if you get a photo from somebody's blog, like, yeah, I'm really huge on definitely making sure you give that person credit. But if someone's going to excerpt your book, and let's say they use, let's just some ridiculous, like let's say they use 3 chapters, which would be much longer than any average excerpt. Realistically, that's not going to hurt the sales of your book. It's going to help it more than hurt it, unless it's a terrible book. Well, actually, even then, because if they don't know the book exists, they're not going to buy it. Exactly.
It's an interesting test. We should try it. No, we shouldn't.
Yeah.
We could get in a lot of trouble.
Well, you know who has tried it? Cory Doctorow. He gives all his books away for free. They're open source. You can, they're copy left, whatever you want to call it. You can completely copy, as far as I know, a Cory Doctorow book. It's in the public domain. Like everything else, pre-Mickey Mouse, even though his stuff is post-Mickey Mouse, because he truly believes that, and if you see, I don't know if he would be as famous as he is today if he hadn't given it. Which isn't to speak on the quality of his writing. I just, there's a lot of great writers who aren't famous, but
well, that's
he is.
That was going to be a question I asked. When it comes to things like, publicity, social networking for writers, are you constantly trying to come up with novel ways to break the norm? Because there was I think, is it Scott Segler? I think that's how you pronounce his last name. The way he promotes his books is he podcasts a chapter a week or a chapter every couple of days, sometimes even while he's writing it. So he can say, this is my latest chapter of the book I'm writing. He'll read it out, and then the people that listen give feedback and say, I think your character should go left or right or such and such. And he effectively crowd builds his book. And then when it's out, he can say, here it is. People jump in on it and buy it because they go, well, we've been through this journey with him from chapter 1 through to the end.
He's doing 2 things there also, because he's got regular content that he's posting to his website. And so I would say part of the advantage there is that a lot of times when I talk to writers, they're like, oh, I don't want to start a blog. And like, so what you're telling me is you don't want to write? Like, that's what a blog is. It's writing. Isn't that kind of what you're here for? But I'm writing this novel. It's like, well, publish, a paragraph that you wrote from the 3 pages you wrote today and say, here's, the thing about this paragraph that I want to share with you, or talk about the research you're doing. There's, it's basically a journal, and you're the, I like to think, the word blog comes from web log, and I like to think of it like the captain's log of the ship of your life, that you're just, sailing down the river, and the captain has to sort of keep this log of here's where we're at with this project I'm working on, and that's what the blog should be. So, that's a technique that's worked for him, and what's great is he's getting content out there, as opposed to most people who they write and they keep it all very private, which I totally understand. The need to not share something that's not ready. But there is something that you can share, and so it's sort of finding that place where the thing you write about can interest people. So, somebody who writes a book about Gothic angels, might post something they were reading on Wikipedia about angels, but then they also might post, like, look at these, kick-ass black boots that I saw on eBay, and that's not exactly about their book at all, but it's the same audience. It's the same appeal in that regard. So, I tend to look at every client individually and say, well, who is this person's audience, and what content will bring that audience in that I can also pull out of my author? Because, authors, they only have a certain amount of energy, and I don't want to write everything on their blog for them. A, because they can't afford that, and B, because it's a little disingenuous. It's not really how, the internet's supposed to work.
That's the thing.
It's not just, I guess what I'm saying is, it's not just how can we be clever and pull people in with something new that's never been done. It's also like, what can I get this author to do?
Does that become you're trying to effectively bring out the personal side of them, I think, because we see that a bit as well. You've got here's my author page, and it's got a picture of them, and it's just one blog post that says,
yeah.
I used to write short stories back in 2001. And that's it, though. But by sort of posting up pictures of boots that they're looking at, does it sort of give it more that humanistic touch that the reader's going, yeah, this is a real person that's actually interested in not only what they've written, but the whole thing is,
Definitely. I mean, there's a line, right? Like if your blog is just pictures of your kids and your cats, and really, I'm sorry, nobody cares. But you look at somebody like Will Wheaton. He's probably now as famous or more famous than he was when he was a kid on Star Trek. And I remember growing up, my friend had a crush on Will Wheaton, so we would have to watch everything that he was in, and I would just kind of roll my eyes. But now I'm a huge Will Wheaton fan because he doesn't just post. I mean, he posts geeky things, so that appeals to the geeky side of me. And he doesn't just post things related to the movies and the TV shows that he's been in. He just posts things that appeals to him as a geek, and they appeal to him politically. And sure, he's probably losing a lot of people who don't share his political views and aren't geeky, but that's okay, because as a niche, the niche of people who are, progressive and geeky, is huge. It's a huge, huge niche, and he's fine just marketing to those people and just appealing to those people. And what it creates is this user base of people who it's not just, Will Wheaton's kind of cool. It's like they love Will Wheaton. They'll follow him everywhere. They follow him on Tumblr. They follow him on Twitter. They follow him RSS. They can't get enough because they feel like they know him. I mean, that's celebrity culture, is that feeling of that these people are your friends in some way. That if you could drink coffee, if we could go out for coffee with these people, that we would all get along, and we would just be hanging out, and it would be great, and we would all make jokes, and it would be swell.
Well, I think the way he's done it as well is he's comfortable making a mockery of that as well. Like, especially on the Big Bang Theory. Yeah, and I think
that's necessary because so many people mock his work.
And that's right, and so he can be there making a joke of himself on something like The Big Bang Theory, where he's like, oh, yeah, well, I was on Star Trek. And I think that helps a lot. And I know what you mean by a celebrity status. As just fans and followers, you do marketed right. You think, oh, I could hang out with that person. But like I know firsthand, when you contact some of them, they can be absolute a-holes. But that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good publicity, I suppose. All right, we've got a few things that we need to move on to, but very quickly, give us your 15-second elevator speech about what you do with The Future is Fiction.
Well, what I do is I work with writers and other creative types, and I help them build a platform or find a platform that can share their voice. So everything that I do is customized to the particular author's needs and their campaign, so that can be something like building them a WordPress site, that can be consulting with them and helping brainstorm with them to come up with blog posts. I do a lot of editing and formatting of blog posts, but I also do traditional media campaigns where I'll do outreach to producers for radio shows and TV shows, as well as the print media, magazines. Like I said, it really just depends on that particular author who I reach out to and how we decide to do things. One of the things I can say about editing blog posts that's a little unique about what I offer is that I have traditional editorial skills in Chicago manual style. I have a search engine optimization experience, as well as the experience to, I know HTML and CSS, and I can really dig into the code and make sure everything's presented nicely. So it's an interesting balance of skills that I bring to the table. You're going to meet some traditional publicity, some traditional publicists who have a fantastic skill set, follow up, and contacting people who work for magazines, but they don't really understand the internet. Or you're going to have some people who, maybe they know about SEO and they know how to really structure a blog post so that it's appealing, but they don't really know anything about traditional editing, and they don't know an M- from an N-. So, I have those kind of three skill sets that I think have something a little unique that I bring to the table.
And I think, because Catherine's not here, which is a bummer, but
I noticed that.
I didn't. No. It might pay to just help her out, I think, when it comes to things like Twitter, Facebook, Google+. That poor woman somehow has 2 Google+ accounts that she doesn't know which one she's logged into at any point in time. So if you're following Catherine on somewhere like Google+, add both her accounts. just in case. So yes, she's a good writer, good speaker, awful at Twitter.
A lot of people are overwhelmed by social media.
Yeah, I don't know. You've got to embrace these things, and you have to be willing to make comments on cat photos.
I don't know that you do. I don't think you have to comment on cat photos. You can let those go. But why wouldn't you? I mean, all it takes is an cute kitty.
I know. All I'm thinking about now is cats with guns. That cracks me up. Like,
oh, great.
I'm going to have to look this up later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so your website is karmabennett.com?
Yeah, isn't that ironic that I said people shouldn't get their name for a URL, but I just happen to own it, so.
Yes, that's all right. All right, well, stick around. We've got a couple of things to do.
Yeah, we should spell that because, you know, you've got that that accent that makes it sound like my name's Karma Bennett. Karma. That's what I wanted to put out there. Okay.
How should it be? Karma? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not going to attempt to. How should I? Karma? I don't know.
Yeah, karma. Oh, this is awesome.
I mean, the way you say it is perfect. I just want to make sure that the strange American people can spell it with my strange pronunciation that I've chosen.
You weirdos. No, it's all right.
Yes.
All links are going to be on our show notes anyway, and I'll.
Oh well, there we go.
Have it in the description of the podcast. But a lot of writers like to use prompts. Now, I don't know about you. I mean, you know, you've got a writing background. Did you ever get into things like seeing a prompt and think, yeah, I can write something about that? Get the writing juices flowing.
Yeah. Well, I do have one suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to futuresfiction.com/plotpoints/index.cgi, I can send you this link.
Yes, please.
I have built a plot generator, which essentially you go to this page and you click a button, and it will just say something terrible that you can do to your characters to put them in a sticky situation, because we know conflict drives story and conflict reveals character. So it's just got hundreds and hundreds of various things that can happen to your character to mess up their day.
I'm going to use that.
You just pick one,
Yeah, don't pick them all, because that would get confusing.
Well, that and sometimes you click it and you're like, let's see what the next one is. Let's see what the next one is, and then you got to write at a certain point.
Yes. No, send me that link, because I may have need of that actually, where I am. Well, this prompt Catherine sent me is, what about before? Along the lines of, if only I'd known, describe the day before bad news, the day before good news. If it's fiction, what kind of clues can you drop that indicate pending disaster or triumph? Huh. Yes, what about the day before?
It reminds me a little bit of, in plotting, how you talk about the first chapter being the setup so that you can, when the adventure is launched and you go into that adventure, you want to show that now this person's entering a new world, and the only way to do that is to show how their world was before, to show, this is what a normal day looks like before the adventure begins.
Yeah, I mean, if you apply that to real world, I think most people would say the day before was pretty average. It's pretty boring.
But average for you and average for me is totally different. I mean, I'm naturally, my assumption is that you're regularly killing dingoes, and I don't know what one of those is, but I hear they're a problem where you are. It's just, whereas where I am, naturally it's wildfires on a daily basis. So
yeah, I can dispel that sort of myth. That I can assure you that most of us here in Australia are not out there murdering native wildlife just for the sake of it. Other than kangaroos, they're a pain in the ass. And
you see, you're really just reaffirming all my stereotypes now.
Yes, but kangaroos, they make good cat food. I'm not joking either.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure cats make good cat food. So.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, yeah, if they're walking around with guns, then it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck getting them that.
Look, the day that cats carry guns, which is probably not far off in America from what we see in our news feeds, that's a scary place.
It's funny you mention that, because my sweetie just read me a blog post last night that was about how in medieval times they used to strap explosives to cats and throw them at castles, or they would in a different time period, they had shields where essentially they made cats into shields. I'm not sure how to visualize that, but if you had to do hand-to-hand combat and there was an angry cat, which I imagine the cat's pretty ticked off, that's strapped to a shield, that's going to make attacking that person a little more difficult. It was a really good blog post. I thought I learned a lot about history. That's
interesting. Now I'm picturing, like when you're training to be a warrior, I was like, you idiot! You put the cat on the wrong way. Like,
See, no, the first thing I picture is like the person's struggle to try to strap the explosive onto the cat, because that cat gets it. This is a bad idea. It is not into this at all. And these are not going to be well-groomed felines. They're going to have serious claws. These are going to be feral kitties. Even a domesticated kitty is not going to take too nicely to you strapping them to a shield. So that's what I picture is the struggle of the soldier to try to, subdue this cat. But it was a really smart post on war. It's from D&D with Porn Stars, but he actually was a guest post he wrote for another site. I don't, not real into RPGs, but that's a really, really clever. It's funny. I come on here and the one blog I promote here ends up being D&D with Porn Stars, but it was a really good post because he talked about how they were saying it doesn't make any sense for anyone to strap an explosive to a cat, and he's like, well, nothing you do in war makes sense, and it was kind of came around to that point in a clever way.
Oh, if anyone's got any pictures of cats strapped to shields, please send them in.
Yeah, we can do that.
podcast@newbiewriters.com. Send them in, I'll post them up. Word of the week. This is from Arlene Miller's Weird and Wonderful Word series found at bigwords101.com. The word is jark. J-A-R-K.
I know that word.
A seal or insignia on a counterfeit document. Who would have thought there would even be a name for that? Interesting. You're Googling that now, aren't you? I can hear you typing.
No, I'm looking for pictures of cats on shields.
Of course. So yes, jark. See if you can use it. I don't know where you'd use that. I mean, if you're doing a counterfeit document, I don't think you really care that the seal that you're putting on it is fake anyway. So yes. All right, we'll do a quick tortured sentence. You'll love this one. Speaking of cats on shields.
Next time, don't put the wrong fasteners on the right slab. Tortured sentences.
All right. Catharine usually sends these in from via her students. So if you hear your sentence, sucks to be you. You should try a bit harder. This poem was written by Sylvia Plath, was written in approximately 1963, right before her sudden death by suicide. Right. I don't know how a sudden death by suicide. I've got no
context. You could have a slow death by suicide.
I suppose.
Virginia Woolf, right? Didn't she walk into the ocean just with like rocks tied to her feet? That'd take a while.
It would take a while.
Technically, Sylvia Plath's death probably wasn't that sudden because she stuck her head in the oven. So that'd take, like, I don't know, at least half an hour, right? What qualifies as sudden death?
It depends on what setting she had it on. Like if it was on grill or slow roast.
Oh, no. I think it's just the gas.
Oh, right.
I don't think she, like, cooked her brain. That would be a really intense commitment to death, though.
Yeah.
To cook your brain.
Your timer goes off, ding, you roll over, cook the other side.
Yeah.
Sweetheart, come and baste my neck. Anyway. What have you sent me here?
I sent you the article with the pictures of the cats with the rockets on their back.
Oh, right. Cool. Well, that's something to read. All right, now, is there anyone you want to give a shout-out to?
I want to give a shout-out to Jim Nelson, is one of my clients, and he is in his 90s, but has recently just republished a book he wrote in the 1950s called The Trouble with Gumballs, so I'm really proud of him for keeping on trucking, because I think that's super cool. And his book is really funny, so if you're into Northern California and you're curious about life in the era of Mad Men, he was a madman. He wasn't a crazy man. He was an ad man.
Wow.
So here, that's part of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on. It's been a lot of fun.
You're welcome. It has been fun.
All right. Well, until next week, I don't know who I've got on. It's on my list somewhere, but stick around for that. So until next week, we'll see you then.
Take care.
just when you thought it was safe to be productive. This is the Newbie Writers Podcast.